So I want to talk about Alan Dershowitz for a moment. So Alan Dershowitz is a Harvard law professor who's also a Democratic Party smear merchant who, throughout the course of the DNC chair race, he insisted that Keith Ellison is anti-Semitic. Now, the reason for this is because of Keith Ellison's former association with Louis Farrakhan in his college days. But to someone like Alan Dershowitz, any and all criticism of Israel is tantamount to bigotry. So, for example, if I were to say and declare that I support Palestinian human rights and I condemn illegal settlements that the Israeli government continues to build, he would claim that I'm anti-Semitic because of that. So this is the type of person that we're dealing with. Israel is allowed to commit war crimes and violate international law, and if you criticize them, you're an anti-Semite. Now, what's interesting to me is that Keith Ellison could have flipped it around and claimed that Alan Dershowitz was an anti-Muslim bigot, but Keith Ellison chose to take the high road, and I don't think it behooved him to do this. I think that he should have fought fire with fire, and this smear campaign waged against him by people like Alan Dershowitz, in part, is why Keith Ellison lost. Now, Alan Dershowitz went on Fox News to gloat about how Keith Ellison was defeated, and in the process, he said some other things that I think were really, really stupid.
The election of Tom Perez, is this a real directional change, more moderates or the establishment's in charge, or is this just a last gasp of the Clinton-Obama regime, but the party really does want to move further left?
And are you staying in the party?
Well, I think I'm staying in the party because Ellison was defeated, and the Ellison defeat is a victory in the war against bigotry, anti-Semitism, the anti-Israel push of the hard left within the Democratic Party. Look, I wish that Perez hadn't appointed Ellison to any position in the Democratic Party, but I'm going to stay in the Democratic Party and work to try to move it toward the center, to try to move it away from the hard left, to try to move it away from its twist toward opposition to Israel and toward American values. It's going to be an uphill fight, but I'm there to fight that battle. We won this battle. We won the battle when at the convention they tried to put an anti-Israel element in the platform. We won that narrowly. So I think we can still fight and win for centrist values. Look, the Democrats are marginalizing themselves. They have to understand we are not a hard left country. When the Democrats nominated McGovern, when they nominated Dukakis, when they nominated Walter Mondale, the three of them together didn't get enough electoral votes to win one election. You'd think they'd learn the lesson, that they have to move to the center. We are a centrist country. And I worry that the Republicans are moving too far right in some plays. The Democrats are moving too far left. It's happening in Europe. We have to return to the vital center and have debates between centrist liberals and centrist conservatives. That's where our country is.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
So I honestly lost count as to how many dumb things he said in that short clip. So he says, there's this anti-Israel push with the hard left of the party. Alan, nobody's anti-Israel. We all support a two-state solution, meaning we support a Palestinian and an Israeli state. We're not calling for the abolition of the Israeli state. We're saying that we do not support the right-wing government in Israel that continues to break international law and violate Palestinian human rights. Saying that doesn't make us anti-Israel. It makes us reasonable human beings. And I also speak out against the actions of the U.S. military as well. When my government commits war crimes, when my government breaks international law, I speak out against it. Does that make me anti-American? No, it makes me a reasonable human being that cares about the well-being of others. But yet, according to Alan Dershowitz, you're anti-Israel, you're a bigot if you condemn war crimes against human beings. Now, he also said, I'm going to stay in the Democratic Party and work to try to move it towards the center, to move it away from the hard left, to move it away from the twist towards opposition towards Israel. If your goal is to move the Democratic Party to the center, you're done. You could pack it up and go home, because the Democratic Party is a centrist party. And if most Democrats in Congress now aren't centrist enough for you, then you're just advocating for a party full of blue dog Democrats. You're a conservative. Just admit it. Leave the party. You are a conservative. And then he also states, we won the battle when at the convention, the hard left tried to put an anti-Israel element in the platform. We won that narrowly. Hey, why don't you tell us, Alan, what this anti-Israel element of the platform would have been? Tell us how it's anti-Israel. Because I'm going to tell you, because he didn't want to tell you why it's anti-Israel. This provision in the platform, it would have condemned Israel's illegal occupation of Palestine and condemned their illegal settlements on Palestinian land. How is that anti-Israel? See, I'm getting to think that you're anti-Palestinian. I'm starting to think that you hate Muslims. Is that why you were smearing Keith Ellison? Is this really about anti-Semitism? Is this really about being anti-Israel? Maybe you have your own bias. So as you claim that others are bigoted, maybe you should look in the fucking mirror, Alan. Now, he also states the Democrats keep marginalizing themselves. They have to understand we are not a hard left country. And then he brings up McGovern and Dukakis and how they failed miserably and says you'd think that they'd learned their lesson, that they have to move to the center. You just ran a centrist candidate and lost. You just did that. Did you not learn your lesson? And furthermore, he's bringing up candidates that lost before people like me were even born. George McGovern. Nobody who's young knows who George McGovern is. This is a new day and age. This is a new era in American politics. And when you say that we're not a hard left country, what he's referring to here is Bernie Sanders. He's saying that we're not a hard left country, and by and large, Americans disagree with the policies of Bernie Sanders. Well, let's look into that. So Bernie wants to get money out of politics because money has too much influence on our elections. The New York Times and CBS did a poll and found out that 66% of the country believes that the wealthy has more influence than everyone else, and 84% think that money plays too big of a role in elections. Looks like they agree with Bernie Sanders here, Alan. Also, Bernie Sanders supports a Medicare for all healthcare system. So does 58% of the country, according to Gallup. Now, Bernie Sanders also supports tuition-free education at public colleges and universities. Oh, look at that. So does 62% of the country. So, I hate to break it to you, Alan, but the country agrees with Bernie Sanders. Hence why, when you look at public opinion polls, he was defeating Donald Trump by a 10-point margin on average. And, getting to this issue of tuition-free college education, he's suggesting here that we're unreasonable for wanting that, but let me tell you how selfish Alan Dershowitz is. So back in the day when Alan Dershowitz was a young man, when he was my age, because he's educated, he has his PhD, the government subsidized public education a lot more than they do today. And even if you couldn't afford tuition back then, you would take out a student loan and you would be able to pay it off within years. And you also had more opportunities to get a job if you did graduate. But nowadays, what we're asking for, we're saying we just want to return to that era where the government funded education more, where they actually subsidized the cost of college tuition so that way the cost doesn't just keep skyrocketing every single year. So what Alan Dershowitz is telling my generation is, you know what? My generation, we got ours. So now all of you can fuck off. All you millennials who are in debt, who have to go to college, but you have less opportunities than my generation had. Well, you know what? I don't care about your generation because my generation was able to go to college because the government subsidized education more. And if you ask for the federal government to subsidize college education more, you're unreasonable. You're the hard left and people disagree with you. So back in my day, which was about 205 years ago, it was okay for the government to subsidize education. But nowadays, it's not okay. This elitist snob here actually has the audacity to tell us that what we're asking for, which is a return to the policies back in the day that made it so easy for people from Alan Dershowitz's generation to go to college, we're asking for a return to that, but yet we're unreasonable. I find that so insulting. You're a snob, Alan Dershowitz. You are a complete elitist prick. Now, he also states, and I worry that the Republicans are moving too far right and the Democrats are moving too far left. We have to return to the vital center. This is something that frustrates me so much, and the fact that it's coming from a professor at Harvard Law, it's really troubling to me. This is not how ideological shifts work, Alan. Maybe you should go talk to someone in the political science department at Harvard because you're out of your league here. There's never a time when you're in a two-party system where the parties will move away from each other. They move with each other. That's how ideological shifts work. So the reason why the Democratic Party is moving to the right is because the Republican Party continues to move to the right. And I mean, you're a professor, Alan. How do you not know this already? How do you not know how ideological shifts work? How do you not know how party politics work? They're never going to move apart from each other. They're always going to be in sync with each other. And if one party moves right, the other's going to move right. That's the way it works, Alan. How could you say that with a straight face? That's so stupid. Even if it's the case that he's right and Democrats are moving to the left, which they're not, wouldn't you want to cater to that huge open portion of the electorate? Millennials who are, by and large, registered now as independents, wouldn't you want to try to bring them in? Well, Alan Dershowitz doesn't seem to think so.
They do not have to try to attract the Jill Stein Green Party voters. Those people, those extremists, will never vote for a liberal Democrat because nobody will ever be far enough left for them. They have to attract people in middle America. They have to attract the people they lost in the last election in Minnesota, in Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And Keith Ellison's not going to do that. He will alienate all those people. So it was a smart move on the part of the Democratic, quote, establishment to move slightly toward the center. But I'm worried that the pressure from the Sanders wing is still going to push.
Well, we're not just going to push the Democratic Party still, Alan. We're going to take over the Democratic Party. And as a Jill Stein extremist, I've already shown to you that the American people, they're on my side when it comes to tuition-free college. They're on my side when it comes to a single-payer healthcare system and getting money out of politics. They agree with me, not you. So if you honestly think that centrism is the solution when centrism is what pushed millions of progressives out of the party, then you're more out of touch than I thought. You are clueless, Alan, and the fact that you're a law professor at Harvard, you should be embarrassed to be espousing so much bullshit. You know nothing.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.